The stranger in the bar. The galaxy was vast, and its corners were filled with strange and wonderful places. One such place was a small, dimly lit bar on the edge of the Helios cluster. The bar was known as the Nebula Haven, a spot where smugglers, travelers, and adventurers stopped to rest and share their stories. The air was thick with the scent of alien spices and a faint hum of unknown technology. That evening, the bar was busy. Aliens of all shapes and sizes filled the room, speaking in various languages and sipping drinks that glowed, bubbled, or smoked. Some were playing games, others were arguing, and a few sat silently in the shadows, observing. It was just another ordinary night, until the door slid open. A human walked in. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. Most aliens considered them either too reckless or too strange to venture so far from their home systems. But this human was different. He was tall, with a confident stride, wearing a long coat that had seen many travels. His dark hair was slightly messy, and his sharp eyes scanned the room like he was looking for something or someone. The bar grew quiet for a moment. Conversations paused, and curious eyes followed the human as he walked to the counter. The bartender, an alien woman with green, glowing eyes and smooth silver skin, was cleaning a glass with her 3 hands. She raised one eyebrow as he approached. "What can I get you, traveler?" she asked in a smooth, melodic voice. Her tone was polite, but there was a hint of curiosity. The human smiled, a small, confident grin. "I'm looking for a drink," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Something unique." The bartender tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "Unique, huh? We have drinks from across the galaxy. What exactly are you looking for?" "A drink only humans can handle," the human said, leaning slightly against the counter. His words hung in the air, and the entire bar seemed to lean in, listening. A murmur spread through the crowd. Whispers in different languages filled the room. "Did he just say, only humans?" One alien hissed. "That's insane," another muttered. "No human can survive the real stuff." The bartender's expression grew serious. She set the glass down and leaned closer to the human. "Do you know what you're asking for?" she said quietly. "We don't serve that kind of drink lightly. It's dangerous." The human's smile widened. "I'm not here for the safe stuff." The bartender straightened, crossing her arms. "And what makes you think you can handle it?" "Because I'm human," he replied simply. His tone wasn't arrogant, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the bar listen. "We adapt. We survive." The room fell silent again. Even the rowdy group of aliens playing cards in the corner had stopped to watch. The bartender studied the human for a long moment, her glowing eyes flickering slightly as if she were calculating something. Finally, she sighed. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." She turned and reached under the counter, pulling out a small vial filled with a glowing blue liquid. The liquid seemed alive, swirling and pulsing with energy. The crowd gasped. A few aliens even backed away from the counter. One of them, a scaly creature with 4 arms, muttered, "No one survives the blue fire. Not even humans." The bartender placed the vial on the counter and looked at the human. "This is it. We call it stellar ember. It's made from a rare extract found on dying stars. Even a sip can be lethal if your body isn't strong enough." The human didn't flinch. He picked up the vial, holding it up to the dim light of the bar. The liquid cast an eerie glow on his face, but his expression remained calm. The bartender leaned in again, her voice low. "Are you sure about this?" The human met her gaze, his eyes steady. "Absolutely." The tension in the room was thick. Every pair of eyes was locked on the human as he uncorked the vial. The faintest hiss escaped as the seal broke, and the liquid shimmered even brighter. Slowly, he brought the vial to his lips. Time seemed to slow. The bartender's glowing eyes widened. The crowd held their breath. And then, just as the human tipped the vial to take the first sip, the screen fades to black. The secret ingredient, the Nebula Haven, was silent as everyone stared at the human. waiting for what would happen next. But instead of collapsing or showing pain, he set the empty vial down on the counter with a soft clink. He let out a small, satisfied sigh, like someone who had just enjoyed a refreshing glass of water. The bartender froze. Her 3 hands hovered midair, her glowing green eyes wide with disbelief. "You finished it," she whispered. The other patrons erupted into chaos. Aliens of all shapes and sizes jumped from their seats, pointing and whispering in a mix of awe and confusion. Some thought it was a trick. Others were sure they'd just witnessed a miracle. The human, calm as ever, turned to the bartender. "Not bad," he said casually, tapping the counter with his finger. "A little stronger than I expected, but I've had worse." The bartender leaned in, lowering her voice to a hiss. "That wasn't just a drink. That was stellar ember. Do you even know what you just consumed?" "Sure," the human replied, brushing some imaginary dust off his sleeve. "A cocktail made from star essence. Toxic to most species, fatal even in small doses. But humans," he smirked, "we like a challenge." The bartender shook her head in disbelief. "No human has ever survived the full dose before. Most can barely handle a diluted version. How are you still standing?" The crowd pressed closer, eager to hear his answer. A towering alien with 3 glowing orbs for eyes growled, "You're lying. Humans are weak. You're bluffing." The human turned, his smirk fading into something more serious. "You think I'm weak. You think Earth sent me all the way out here because I couldn't handle a drink." His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. The bartender broke the tense silence. "If you're so confident, maybe you can explain why you asked for it in the first place. No one drinks stellar ember for fun." The human paused, his eyes scanning the room. The other patrons watched him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. He leaned closer to the bartender and said in a low voice, "I needed to see if the rumors were true." "What rumors?" the bartender asked, her glowing eyes narrowing. The human glanced over his shoulder, making sure no one else was listening too closely. "Rumors about your secret ingredient," he said quietly. "The thing that makes stellar ember so dangerous." The bartender's expression hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," the human said, his tone sharper now. "I've been to bars across the galaxy. I've heard whispers about a substance that comes from dying stars. Pure energy, unfiltered. But I also heard something else, something no one can confirm." He leaned in even closer. "They say your version of the drink contains etherium." The room seemed to grow colder at the mention of the word. Etherium was a substance of legend. It was said to be a material that could bend time, amplify energy, and even manipulate reality. Most believed it was a myth, a story told by smugglers and pirates to impress their crews. But the human's eyes were serious. The bartender hesitated, her glowing eyes darting nervously around the room. "Even if that were true," she said slowly, "why would you care? What's a human like you doing chasing myths?" "Because it's not a myth," the human replied, "and Earth needs it." The bartender's glowing eyes flickered. "Earth needs it? For what?" The human straightened, crossing his arms. "That's classified," he said simply. "But let's just say, if I don't find etherium soon, my planet might not survive what's coming." The bartender stared at him, her silver skin shimmering under the bar's dim lights. For a moment, it looked like she was about to say something. But then, a loud crash interrupted them. The crowd turned toward the sound. A group of alien mercenaries had risen from their seats in the corner. They were tall, muscular creatures with reptilian features and glowing red eyes. Their leader, a scared brute with a deep voice, pointed at the human. "I knew you looked familiar," he growled. "You're one of those Earth operatives, aren't you? Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." The human didn't flinch. "What's it to you?" The leader stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Etherium doesn't belong to Earth. If you think you're walking out of here with it, you're dead wrong." The bartender stepped back, her glowing eyes wide with fear. "Not in my bar," she warned. "Take it outside." But the mercenary leader ignored her, his attention locked on the human. "Hand over what you've got, or we'll tear you apart." The human smiled faintly. "You're welcome to try." The room exploded into chaos as the mercenaries charged toward the human. The bartender ducked behind the counter, shouting for everyone to take cover. But the human didn't move. He stayed calm, his hands resting casually on the counter. Just as the first mercenary reached him, the human flicked his wrist. A small device on his arm lit up, and a flash of bright light filled the room. The mercenaries roared in pain, stumbling back as their weapons short-circuited. The human stood, his eyes cold. "I'm not here for a fight," he said. "But if you want one, I'm ready." The unexpected reaction. The bar was in shambles. Tables overturned, glasses shattered, and the faint smell of burning metal lingered in the air. The patrons who hadn't fled were now crouched in corners, watching the scene with a mix of fear and fascination. At the center of it all stood the human, calm and composed, with a faint glow from the device on his wrist. The mercenaries, still reeling from the shockwave he'd unleashed, growled and snarled. Their leader, the scared brute with red, glowing eyes, wiped a smear of blood from his scaly face. "You've got guts, human," he spat. "But let's see how long that arrogance lasts." The human didn't respond. Instead, he glanced at the bartender, who was crouched behind the counter, her three hands trembling. "You might want to duck," he said casually. The bartender's glowing green eyes widened, and she immediately ducked lower. Just as she did, the mercenary leader lunged forward, his blade humming with energy. The weapon cut through the air with a sharp, high-pitched sound, aimed directly at the human's neck. But the human was faster. With a swift movement, he raised his arm, and the device on his wrist emitted a shimmering, translucent shield. The blade struck the shield and bounced back with a crackle, sending sparks flying. The mercenary leader stumbled, momentarily thrown off balance. The human took a step forward, his expression calm but deadly serious. "I told you," he said, his voice low. "I'm not here for a fight. But if you push me, I won't hold back." The mercenary leader growled, gripping his blade tighter. "You think you're the first human to act tough out here? I've crushed dozens like you. You're nothing." The human's lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe, but you've never met a human like me." Before the mercenary could respond, the human raised his other hand, revealing a small, circular device. He pressed a button, and a low hum filled the air. The lights in the bar flickered, and a strange energy pulse rippled through the room. The mercenaries froze, their weapons sparking and failing one by one. What did you do?" One of them stammered, dropping his malfunctioning blaster. "EMP," the human said simply. "Electromagnetic pulse. Fried your tech. You're welcome." The mercenaries looked at each other, their confidence faltering. Without their weapons, they were vulnerable. But their leader wasn't ready to back down. He dropped his blade and lunged at the human with his bare claws, roaring in rage. This time, the human didn't wait. He stepped to the side with lightning speed, grabbing the mercenary leader's arm and twisting it behind his back. With a swift motion, he slammed the brute onto the counter, causing it to creak under the weight. "Enough," the human said, his voice icy. "You're done." The bar was silent again. The remaining mercenaries didn't dare move, their glowing eyes wide with fear. The human released their leader, letting him collapse to the floor in a heap. "Now," the human said, straightening his coat, "who's next?" No one stepped forward. The bartender slowly rose from behind the counter, her hands still shaking. "What are you?" she whispered. The human turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "I told you," he said. "I'm just a traveler, but I don't have time for games." The bartender hesitated, then glanced down at the glowing vial still on the counter. "You survived the drink," she said quietly, "and you defeated them without breaking a sweat. But why are you really here? What do you want?" The human leaned on the counter, meeting her glowing eyes. I need the truth, he said. About stellar ember. About the Aetherium. Her expression darkened. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, he said, his voice firm. You've been serving it for years, hiding it in plain sight. But it's not just a drink, is it? It's something more. Something powerful. The bartender's glowing eyes flickered, betraying her fear. Even if that were true, she said slowly, why would a human care? You've got no idea what you're dealing with. I know enough, the human replied. Aetherium isn't just a rare substance. It's the key to survival. Earth is running out of options. If we don't find a way to harness its power, billions will die. The bartender stared at him, her expression unreadable. And you think you can just take it? Do you have any idea what will happen if the wrong people find out it's here? You're risking more than you realize. I'm not leaving without it, the human said, his tone unwavering. So you can either help me, or I'll find it myself. Before the bartender could respond, the door to the bar slid open again. A new group of aliens entered, heavily armed and dressed in dark, menacing armor. Their leader, a tall figure with glowing red symbols etched into his skin, scanned the room. Looks like we're late to the party, he said with a sinister smile. His eyes locked onto the human. Hand over the Aetherium, and maybe we'll let you live. The human sighed, glancing at the bartender. I told you this wouldn't be easy. The human's revelation. The bar was tense, silent except for the faint hum of the alien newcomer's weapons. The leader of the group, a tall figure with crimson symbols glowing faintly across his dark armor, smirked as he stepped forward. His voice was calm, but laced with menace. I'll give you one chance, human. Surrender the Aetherium, or I'll scatter your ashes across the stars. The human stood his ground, his expression unflinching. You're making two big assumptions, he said, his voice even. One, that I have the Aetherium, and two, that you could take it from me if I did. A ripple of unease spread through the alien group, but their leader didn't falter. Bold words, he said, but words won't save you. Before the situation could escalate, the bartender stepped forward, her silver skin shimmering in the dim light. Enough, she said sharply, her voice carrying an authority that made even the armed aliens pause. No one fights in my bar. You want to settle this? Take it outside. The alien leader tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing. You've been hiding it here, haven't you? He said, addressing the bartender now. All these years, serving it in drinks like a common ingredient. Do you even realize the power you've been sitting on? The bartender didn't reply, her glowing green eyes flicking briefly to the human. Her silence was all the confirmation the alien leader needed. He sneered. Pathetic. You don't deserve it. And you, he added, pointing his weapon at the human, you're just another scavenger, desperate to claim a prize you don't understand. The human finally moved, stepping closer to the alien leader. The tension in the room thickened as the two locked eyes. I understand more than you think, the human said. I know that Aetherium isn't just a resource. It's the most powerful element in the galaxy, and I know that in the wrong hands, it can destroy entire worlds. The alien leader laughed, a cold, echoing sound. And you think your hands are the right ones? I think my people don't have a choice, the human replied. His voice was steady, but there was an edge of urgency now. Earth is dying. Our atmosphere is failing. Our energy reserves are gone, and our colonies can't sustain the population. We've tried everything. Fusion, antimatter, even dark energy. Nothing works. Aetherium is our last hope. The bartender's expression softened, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. That's why you risked drinking it, she murmured. You needed to prove it wouldn't kill you. The human nodded. If I couldn't handle the drink, I wouldn't survive transporting the raw Aetherium. And if Earth can't stabilize it, we'll find a way to adapt. That's what we do. The alien leader shook his head, his smirk returning. Touching speech. But do you really think I care about your dying planet? Aetherium belongs to the strongest. And that's not you. He raised his weapon, but the human was faster. With a flick of his wrist, the device on his arm emitted a sharp pulse of energy, disarming the leader and sending his weapon clattering to the floor. The alien group reacted immediately, drawing their weapons, but the human held up a hand. "Don't," he warned. "You might think I'm just a scavenger, but I'm not alone. Earth doesn't send its people out here unprepared." As if on cue, a low hum filled the air, followed by the flickering of a holographic display from the device on his wrist. The hologram showed a fleet of Earth ships, sleek and intimidating, hovering above a distant planet. The alien leader's expression faltered. "A bluff," he growled, though his tone betrayed uncertainty. "Try me," the human replied, his voice like steel. "You think I came here without backup? One word from me, and my fleet will wipe out every last one of you. Or," he added, his tone softening just slightly, "you can stand down, and we can settle this peacefully." The alien group hesitated, their confidence shaken. The bartender, sensing the shift, stepped in. "No one's dying tonight," she said firmly. She turned to the human. "If I give you the Aetherium, can you promise it will save your planet? That it won't be used for anything destructive?" The human met her gaze. "I can promise that Earth's survival depends on it," he said. "That's all I can offer." The bartender studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. "Fine, but you'll have to get to it first. It's not just sitting behind the bar." She motioned for him to follow her, but before they could move, the alien leader snarled, "You're making a mistake. The Aetherium doesn't belong to humans, and it never will." "Stay out of my way," the human said coldly, "or I'll show you just how strong we've become." The ambush. The bartender led the human down a narrow, dimly lit corridor behind the bar. The walls pulsed faintly with energy, suggesting that the structure was powered by something far more advanced than it appeared on the surface. Each step echoed ominously, and the air grew colder the farther they went. "This place was built a long time ago," the bartender said, her voice low. "Back when the Helios cluster was still a trading hub, the original owners discovered something buried beneath this building, a fragment of a dying star. That's the Aetherium." The human nodded, his expression serious. "And you've been guarding it all this time, mixing it into drinks to keep its power hidden." The bartender glanced over her shoulder, her glowing green eyes flashing. "You'd be surprised how easy it is to hide something dangerous in plain sight. Most people are too afraid to ask for stellar ember, and those who do usually don't survive it. But you," she hesitated, "you're different." "I'm just a man doing his job," the human replied. "If I don't bring it back, Earth is finished." The bartender opened a heavy, rusted door at the end of the corridor, revealing a hidden chamber. The room was bathed in a soft, golden light emanating from a pedestal in the center. On the pedestal sat a small, crystalline orb, pulsating with raw energy. It seemed alive, humming faintly as if aware of their presence. The human stepped forward, his eyes locked on the orb. "That's it," he said quietly. "Aetherium." The bartender placed a hand on his shoulder. "Be careful. The energy it holds can be unpredictable. If you mishandle it." Before she could finish, a loud crash echoed down the corridor behind them. Both of them spun around, the bartender's glowing eyes narrowing. The human instinctively raised his wrist, activating his energy shield. "They followed us," the bartender hissed. "I knew that mercenary leader wouldn't back down." The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, and moments later, the alien leader appeared in the doorway, flanked by a dozen reinforcements. Their weapons glowed menacingly in the dim light. The leader sneered. "You didn't think I'd let you just walk away with the Aetherium, did you? It's worth more than all your lives combined." The human stepped in front of the bartender, shielding her. "I warned you to stay out of my way," he said, his voice cold. "This is your last chance to walk away." The leader laughed, a deep, guttural sound. "You've got guts, human. I'll give you that. But guts won't save you." He raised a hand, signaling his men to attack. The room erupted into chaos. The human moved quickly, activating a holographic interface on his wrist. A wave of energy pulsed outward, knocking the first wave of attackers off their feet. The bartender ducked behind the pedestal, her 3 hands gripping a small device she had pulled from her pocket. The alien mercenaries regrouped, firing energy bolts that crackled against the human's shield. He returned fire with a compact blaster, each shot precise and lethal. The leader barked orders, urging his men to flank. As the fight intensified, the bartender activated her device, creating a shimmering barrier around the pedestal. "This will protect the Aetherium for now," she shouted, "but it won't hold forever." The human nodded, his focus on the attackers. "Keep it safe. I'll handle them." One of the mercenaries managed to get behind the human, aiming a blade at his back. But the bartender reacted quickly, throwing a small glowing sphere that exploded into a cloud of blinding light. The mercenary screamed, clutching his eyes as he stumbled away. The human glanced back at her. "Nice throw." "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "There's more coming." Sure enough, the alien leader stepped forward, holding a massive, double-edged weapon that hummed with deadly energy. "You're outnumbered and outmatched," he growled. "Give up now, and I might let you live." The human smirked, lowering his weapon slightly. "Outnumbered, maybe. Outmatched, not even close." With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged at the leader, using his energy shield to deflect the weapon's strike. The two clashed in a flurry of movement, the room shaking with the force of their blows. The mercenaries hesitated, unsure whether to intervene or stay back. The bartender, meanwhile, worked furiously on her device, enhancing the barrier around the Aetherium. "I can't hold this forever," she called out. "If you're going to finish this, do it fast." The human locked eyes with the alien leader, their weapons sparking as they clashed. "You're strong," the leader admitted grudgingly. "For a human." "I get that a lot," the human replied, shoving him back with a surge of energy. "But strength isn't enough." In one swift motion, he activated a secondary function on his wrist device, creating a shockwave that sent the leader crashing into the wall. The remaining mercenaries froze, their confidence shattered. The human turned to them, his voice like steel. "Leave. Now." One by one, they dropped their weapons and retreated, dragging their unconscious leader with them. The sound of their footsteps faded into the distance. The human lowered his arm, breathing heavily. The bartender deactivated the barrier, the room falling silent except for the faint hum of the Aetherium. "That was reckless," she said, stepping toward him. "It worked," he replied, his eyes still on the glowing orb. "Now let's get this back to Earth." The artifact's secret. The human approached the Aetherium, its radiant glow casting intricate patterns on his face. He could feel the immense energy emanating from the crystalline orb, a pulsating rhythm that seemed almost alive. In various fictional settings, such crystals are often depicted as powerful sources of energy, capable of feats beyond ordinary technology. "Be cautious," the bartender warned, her voice tinged with concern. "Aetherium is volatile. Mishandling it could be catastrophic." The human nodded, recalling his training. "I've studied methods for transporting volatile energy sources in space. The key is to stabilize its energy emissions during transit." He retrieved a containment unit from his pack, designed specifically for such purposes. The device employed advanced radiation transport methods to safely store and transport high-energy materials. As he carefully placed the Aetherium into the containment field, the room's ambient hum intensified, then gradually subsided as the device stabilized the artifact. The bartender exhaled, visibly relieved. "It's done," the human said, securing the unit. "Now we need to get this to Earth." Before they could move, a low rumble resonated through the chamber. The walls vibrated, and dust fell from the ceiling. The bartender's eyes widened. The energy fluctuations must have triggered a reaction. "This place is unstable." The human cursed under his breath. "We need to evacuate now." They sprinted back through the corridor, the structure trembling around them. As they reached the main bar area, the ground shook violently, knocking over tables and shattering glasses. Patrons scrambled for the exits, panic evident on their faces. The bartender led the way to a concealed hatch behind the counter. "This leads to an emergency escape tunnel." They descended into the tunnel just as a deafening crash echoed above, signaling the collapse of the bar. The passageway was narrow and dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the bartender's eyes. "How far does this tunnel go?" the human asked, his voice echoing. "It leads to the outskirts of the settlement," she replied. "From there, you should be able to reach your ship." As they navigated the tunnel, the human's thoughts raced. Transporting the Aetherium safely to Earth was paramount, but the recent events highlighted the unpredictable nature of the substance. Ensuring its stability during the journey would be a formidable challenge. Emerging from the tunnel, they found themselves in a desolate area, the night sky above dotted with unfamiliar stars. The human activated his communicator, signaling his ship. "Extraction point secured. Prepare for immediate departure," he instructed. Turning to the bartender, he offered a grateful nod. "Thank you. I couldn't have done this without your help." She smiled faintly. "Just make sure that artifact saves your planet. It's caused enough trouble here." As the ship descended, its lights piercing the darkness, the human couldn't shake the feeling that their challenges were far from over. Transporting such a volatile and powerful substance across the galaxy would require constant vigilance and expertise. The part concludes with the human boarding the ship, the containment unit securely fastened, and the bartender watching as they ascend into the starry expanse, both aware that the true test was only beginning.